So hi, hello, it's me again, Aryan Andoyan. Today we're going to discuss the part two, which is Adapting Courses, a Personal View by Claudia Saraceni. Okay. Okay, so Saraceni observes that many course books follow a repetitive and predictable pattern, both in content and structure. Activities often emphasize language manipulation such as drills, substitution tables, and comprehension exercises, rather than authentic communication. Furthermore, topics are typically trivial and disconnected from learners' real interests or needs, especially at lower proficiency levels. Common recurring terms include introductions, food and drink, numbers, science, and transport subjects that are safe and uncontroversial but often inspiring. This characteristic leads to several limitations. First, they demotivate learners due to lack of relevance or engagement. Next, they reinforce stereotypes about the target language and culture. They ignore learners' and teachers' roles in shaping the learning experiences. And they lack innovation and do not reflect current SLA insight on how languages are effectively learned. So, Adapting adapting materials. So despite the fact that it seems a relatively under-researched discipline, in many ways, adapting materials is an inevitable process as it always carried out as a part of classroom practice. The simple fact of using a piece of teaching or earning materials inevitably means adapting it to the particular needs of a specific teaching and learning scenario. In the practice of language teaching, this has been accepted for quite a long time now, according to Madsen and Rowan 1978. So this section highlights the practical and the dynamic nature of teaching. No single coursebook or set of material can perfectly address every learner's needs, cultural context, or proficiency level. Therefore, teachers must act as adapters, constantly reshaping materials to make learning more effective and meaningful. The recognition that adaptation happens naturally in classroom shifts the focus from seeing materials as a fixed product to viewing them as flexible tools. It also empowers teachers, affirming their professional judgment and um, creativity in modifying materials. Moreover, the section suggests that more research and theoretical attention should be given to materials adaptation, since it is a crucial but often overlooked aspect of teaching practice. Understanding this process more deeply could help bridge the gap between theory and practice, ensuring that materials are not just pedagogically sound but also contextually relevant. In short, adapting materials is not optional. It is integral to effective teaching. It allows educators to make learning resources more engaging, more inclusive, and responsive to the unique realities of their classroom. So now we have a teacher-centered approach to adaptation. So the teacher-centered approach reflects the traditional classroom hierarchies where the teacher is viewed as the primary decision maker and authority in instructional design. While this approach has practical advantages such as ensuring coherence, efficiency, and expert judgment, it also limits learner autonomy and reduces the potential for personal learning. So the author critics suggest that although teachers' intuition is valuable, adaptation should not rely solely on individual experiences. Instead, it should be informed by systematic principles, learners' feedback, and empirical evidence from SLA research. When adaptation remains exclusively teacher-centered, it risks overlooking learners' unique preference, the motivation, and cultural background, which are essential for effective language learning. So, this highlights the need for a teacher-centered to a more learner-centered or collaborative approach. Teachers should still guide the adaptation process, but should actively involve learners in selecting topics, in shaping activities, and determining learning goals. Such collaboration would make materials more relevant, more engaging, and more empowering for students. In summary, the teacher-centered approach to adaptation is an important starting point. It ensures structure and professional oversight, but it must not. But it must evolve towards shared decision making to fully realize the potential of adaptation in modern language education. Next, we have a learner-centered approach to adaptation. The learner-centered approach aims to empower learners by involving them in decision about content, method, and materials. It recognizes that learners are not passive recipients, but active participants with valuable insights into their own needs, interests, and learning styles. Through learner-centered adaptation, encourage dialogue, collaboration, and shared responsibility between teacher and student. So in this um, in this part, the author discussion exposes a critical challenge. In many educational contexts, true negotiation rarely happens. Teacher accustomed to holding authority may unintentionally dominate the process, while learners socialize to view teachers as experts. They may hesitate to voice their opinions. As a result, the adaptation process remains only superficially learner-centered. To make this approach genuinely effective, both teachers and institutions must foster a classroom culture of equality and openness. Teachers need to act as facilitators rather than authorities, encouraging students to express preferences and participate in shaping materials. Learners, on the other hand, should be guided and trained to take more active roles in their own learning decisions. While the learner-centered approach represents an ideal model for adaptation, promoting engagement, autonomy, and relevance, its success depends on balanced power relations and the true spirit of negotiation between teachers and learners. Without this balance, even negotiated syllabi risk reverting to traditional teacher-dominated forms. So next we have the adaptation as critical awareness development. So this chapter emphasizes that adaptation is not only the teacher's responsibility but also an opportunity for learners to actively participate in shaping their learning process. It argues for shared ownership of the classroom where learners contribute to both materials adaptation and classroom decisions, gradually gaining control over their own learning. According to Tomlinson, adapting materials can be an awareness development activity, encouraging learners to think critically, make choices, and reflect on their learning experiences. This process also extends to teachers' development as suggested by Wright and Bolito. Since teachers to become more reflective and responsive when they engage in adaptation. The chapter also applies this concept to two main contexts. First, the language classroom, where students adapt materials to express interpretation and understanding. Teacher development courses where teachers practice adaptation to enhance awareness and improve teaching strategies. So, in conclusion, adaptation encourages critical awareness. Student questions meaning, authorship, cultural context, and even the purpose of the text. For teachers, it serves as reflective practice, helping them analyze how material influence learning outcomes and how adaptation can make lesson more inclusive and meaningful. So the poem-based example highlights how literary analysis can merge with creative expression, fostering both linguistic and emotional engagement. By adapting the poem into another form, the art, drama, or music, etc., learners connect language learning with personal experience, promoting deeper understanding and autonomy. An example activity is based on Elizabeth Jennings' poem, The Enemy. It demonstrates how learners can engage critically with text. The activity progresses from pre-reading or predicting the content and generating questions to reading or analyzing meaning and and personal actions to post-reading, the creating adaptation like drawings, plays, or dialogue. This structure allows learners to interact deeply with the material, reflect on the interpretation, and express creatively through adaptation. Now we have the suggestion for further developments and possible adaptation. So Elizabeth Jennings' poem "The Enemies," which will be posting in the comment section, depicts an unsettling scene of an invasion. It begins with strangers who came across the river and entered the city. The townspeople, especially the women, welcomed them without questioning their purpose or identity. By morning, peace still seemed to prevail. There is no devastation, and life appears unchanged. Yet, beneath the slum surface, fear and mistrust grow. People begin to avoid one another, even close friends act cautiously. The poem ends with an airy reflection that the strangers have set up their home in the mind, suggesting that the true invasion is psychological, not physical. This poem, while simple in language, carries deep meaning about fear, distrust, and internal conflict. It raises questions about who the enemies really are, outsiders, or perhaps the doubt and fears within themselves. For language learners, suggested adaptation includes finding modern or local texts that portray enemies in society, comparing poems with similar themes or linguistic styles, presenting their chosen materials through creative means, visual, music, or discussion. So, for language learners, this adaptation encourages active engagement and personal connection with the content. Using modern or local text makes themes more relevant. Comparing poems develops analytic and linguistic skills and creative presentation like visual, music, or discussion. It allows learners to express understanding in diverse, meaningful ways. This approach promotes both language development and critical thinking. For teacher trainees, the adaptation process includes reviewing and redesigning lesson plans, adjusting activities, text, or objective based on learner needs, teaching the adaptive materials, and reflecting on the results afterward. In the context of language learning and teacher education, the poem serves as the tool for developing critical awareness. Learners are encouraged to interpret, question, and adapt the poem through creative and reflective activities, such as writing, dramatizing, or relating it to current issue. On the other hand, teachers or trainees are also invited to modify and expand these activities to suit their learners' needs and classroom realities. And now let's move on to a model for adapting courses. So adapting courses begins with evaluation, understanding what works, what doesn't, and what needs to change to better meet learners' needs. The process of adaptation is not only the teacher's job, but also involves learners' participation as they contribute insights and preferences that help shape learning experiences. So this chapter emphasizes that developers should design resources that are intentionally adaptable, meaning they should be flexible, open ended, and safe for teachers and learners to modify according to context. So, this contrasts with the traditional prescriptive approach, where lessons follow a strict sequence and both teachers and students must adhere closely to preset activities and objectives. This model promotes flexibility, aesthetic engagement before critical analysis. Flexibility is material should allow for multiple interpretation and classroom adaptation. Number two is aesthetic engagement before critical analysis. Before developing critical awareness, learners should first have an emotional or aesthetic experience with the learning material. For example, reading a text or for enjoyment or personal connection before analyzing it. This model ensures that learning materials remain meaningful, inclusive, and adaptive, avoiding the risk of being superficial or irrelevant to diverse learners. And now let's move on to the last of key features in materials adaptation. So this section outlines essential features that should guide the evaluation and adaptation of teaching materials, emphasizing flexibility, learner centeredness, and critical awareness. These features are not fixed rules, but rather guidelines that teachers and learners can further adapt to their specific context. First, we have the learner-centeredness and critical awareness development. So materials should promote learner autonomy, critical thinking, and linguistic empowerment. Learners should not only consume information but also become contributors to the learning process, providing input and helping adapt materials. This idea emphasizes that effective materials should focus on learning active role in education rather than treating students as passive recipients of information. A learner-centered approach encourages students to take ownership of their learning by thinking critically, making decisions, and using language creatively to express their ideas. Second, we have the flexibility and choice. Materials must be flexible and provide options for learners' different activities, projects, or learning paths to cater the varied needs, styles, and preferences. Exposure to a range of tasks, from analytical to creative, helps students become more adaptable and independent learners. Flexibility in materials means giving learners options on variety, so they can choose activities or tasks that match their interests and learning style. Offering different paths from analytical to creative work helps address diverse needs and encourage students to become more adaptable, to become more independent, to become more self-directed in their learning. Third, we have the open-endedness and aesthetic experience. Effective materials should not have a single right answer. Instead, they should promote multiple interpretations, mirroring the aesthetic experience in literature described by Rosenblatt. So open-ended materials encourage multiple perspective and interpretations rather than one fixed answer. This approach foster creativity and personal engagement, similar to Rosenblatt's idea of the state experience in literatures, where learners actively make meaning and um, connect emotionally with what they read or what they do. Fourth, we have the relevance. Materials become relevant when learners actively fill in interpretative gaps through discussion, reflection, and adaptation. Through this process, materials gain personal meanings and educational value. So, materials are relevant when learners engage with them actively, discussing, reflecting, and adapting content. This involvement lets students personalize meaning, making learning more meaningful and more effective. Fifth, we have the universality. Universality topics should be universally relatable, rooted in shared human experiences such as love, family, relationship, and emotions, while allowing exploration of cultural differences and similarities. So, universality in materials means focusing on shared human experiences like love, as I said earlier, the family emotions, but also encouraging learners to explore cultural similarities and differences, making content both relatable and meaningful across contexts. Next, we have the authentic and non-authentic input. Materials should include authentic text, those created for real communication, not just for language teaching, to expose learners to natural language use. However, non-authentic tasks created specifically for teaching can also play a useful role, especially when they help learners notice linguistic patterns in authentic input. This means that material should balance authentic input, the real life text, to show natural language use with non authentic tasks. Why? Because it's designed to highlight pattern or practice skills. This combination helps learners experience real communication while still learning language systematically. And lastly, we have proactive topics and tasks. Engaging material should provoke thought, emotions, and personal response. Proactive here doesn't mean controversial like politics or war, but personally meaningful topics such as family, identity, emotions, and relationships. These subjects stimulate reflection and discussion, leading to deeper learning and human connection. So, proactive materials spark personal reflection and emotional engagement through meaningful topics like family, identity, and relationships. They encourage discussion and deeper learning without being politically or socially controversial. Adaptation in this sense is not just a method, but philosophy of teaching, one that values creativity, diversity, and continuous dialogue between teachers, learners, and materials. In conclusion, adaptation is not just a technical task, but a reflective, empowering process that bridges research and practice. Rather than viewing materials as fixed tools, the chapter frames them as starting points for exploration and growth, adaptable to the needs, experiences, and voices of learners. This approach aligns with the principle of learner-centered education and critical pedagogy, which emphasize autonomy, self-expression, and mutual learning. When learners take part in adapting materials, they engage more deeply, think critically about language, and gain ownership of their learning. Teachers, in turn, move away from being sole authorities and instead create conditions for discovery and by promoting critical awareness, materials adaptation also becomes a vehicle for teachers' development. Teachers learn to question how materials function, how they can be improved, and how they reflect or fail to reflect current research in SLA. This reflective stance helps bridge the persistent gap between theory and classroom reality, making teaching more evidence-based and meaningful. The dual purpose of adaptation, contextualization, and transformation capture both the practical and innovative sides of education. It not only makes lesson more relevant, but also challenges educators to rethink their rule and materials continually. In essence, the chapter concludes that the future of effective language teaching lies in adaptation, an ongoing process of reflection, evaluation, and collaboration among learners, teachers, and researchers. And that's all for our part two, which is Adapting Courses, a personal view by Claudia Saracini. Thank you and goodbye.